as the Director of the Global Security for the Bank of New York, Mellon, in February of 2000. He directs and supervises a worldwide security program that encompasses the investigation and prevention of fraud, related activities, as well as the physical protection of corporate assets, employees, customers, and executives. He serves on the bank's crisis management, business continuity, contingency planning, and anti-money laundering teams, as well as the Sensitive Issues Oversight Committee. The Bank of New York Mellon is a global leader in the financial markets. Mr. Smith retired from the United States Secret Service after 24 years of service. He held a variety of positions in field offices and headquarters, culminating with his appointment as the special agent in charge of the New York field office, the service's largest and busiest office. During his Secret Service career, Mr. Smith was assigned to the Vice Presidential Protective Division, the Presidential Protective Division, and as the Special Assistant to the Treasury Secretary. He served as the security coordinator for several high-profile protective venues, to include the United States delegation attending the Olympic Games in Barcelona, Spain in 1992, the presidential inaugural activities of 1993, the dedication of the Holocaust Museum, Washington, D.C., 1994, and the visit of Pope Paul II to New York in 1995. In 1996, he supervised the protective detail designed to presidential candidate Robert Dole. Mr. Smith is also a founding director of Argyle Security. Argyle Security, by the way, are a sponsor of this conference, and we thank you for it. Argyle Security is a global company in the rapidly growing security industry, focusing particularly on the consolidation opportunities created by new applications of digital technology, the convergence of various security sectors, and growing customer demand for solutions. Mr. Smith holds bachelor's and master's degrees in criminal justice from Westchester University in Westchester, Pennsylvania. And Mr. Smith, we feel a lot safer actually having you in this room with us after reading this curriculum vitae. Much safer. Thank you.
Thank you. It was nice to hear that someone else was technologically challenged, too, because you're going to see someone who's really technologically challenged. Mr. Davis, thank you for the introduction. It's a pleasure to be here, and I greatly appreciate the invitation. It is, I think I have to say that I'm going to thank you profusely because you get it. You really get it. In this conference, the coursework that you're designing now, the coursework that you're involved in right now, we need to take that and spread it across the United States as well, because you really have it down. Support that in any way that you can, because that is something very special. What I wanted to do, I have to mention first, last night at the opening, with the opening remarks, General Clark came up on the platform and stood here at the dais, and my old protective juices started to flow, you know, because he was a presidential candidate. And I thought, boy, wouldn't it be fun to be back there and doing that and scanning the group and looking at different ways of exits and planning all the plans that go into this. And then the minister came up, Minister Dichtert, and he started to speak, and I saw his security professional behind him there, and I was looking around at the crowd, and then I started thinking about, geez, he's standing there a long time like I used to, and my back started hurting, and my legs started hurting, and I thought all the travel, and sorry, General, it's time to just sit down there and for me to listen from now on. What I'd like to do is just talk to you a little bit about some of the corporate lessons that we learned during 9/11, and bring everything down to where I am, which is the practitioner level. So I'm still out there, and I'm still doing these things, and still trying to figure out how we as security professionals can protect our citizens within the corporation and our assets and our clients. So the first thing I usually do when I come out to places like this this makes it real easy because I try to talk about, in the case of an emergency, how do we get out of here? And I want to just raise your level to where mine is all the time. And it's easy here today because we don't have to worry too much about the exits. You just open a flap and you're out. But I have to encourage you that wherever you go and whatever you do, to pay attention to your surroundings. And I mean this in everything that you do. Whether you're walking down the streets, I get amazed when you go in the streets of the city of New York, and you see the people walking with their MP3 players and their iPods, and as I keep telling my wife, I'm cool because I have an iPod, but why they walk down the streets with these things plugged in their ears, I don't know. Because you're just taking away one of the valuable 5 senses that you have that you need to pay attention to your surroundings. And whenever you go into a meeting, I would really encourage you to take a look at the exits. Not just the one closest to you, but the ones anywhere around you. Because you need to know how to get out in case of emergency. If there's a fire, you have to know how to get out. Let's bring it to a real personal level. If you're at a movie theater, most of us come in a movie theater, at least in the States, through the back, and we walk down to our seats, and we sit in our seats, and we enjoy the movie. And because we operate from rote memory, if there is an emergency, we're going to leave the exact same way we came in. And guess what? So is everybody else. Everybody else is going to crush out that way to escape. So take a look at the other exits. And if there's an exit 4 or 5 rows up in front of you, count the rows. Because when the lights go out, you want to be able to know that I only have to go over 4 rows, and I know that that exit's on my right or it's on my left. We really need to pay attention to those things. Hotel rooms, and sometimes my wife thinks I'm crazy, but when we get to the hotel room, we walk around first, and we take a look at the exits. And not only do we take a look at the exits and where they are, the stairwells, but we count the doors from our room to those exits. Because if it's smoke-filled, you're not going to be able to walk down there to see it. And in the States, for some reason, I don't know why, we usually put our exit signs up top. Well, if it's a smoke-filled corridor, we're not going to see those signs at all. Airplanes, I think that's something where we just continually read our newspapers and go about our business without paying attention to anything that's being said. That's a big mistake, obviously a big mistake. They're professionals too. They're security professionals who understand exactly what they're doing. Let's move on here to instincts and intuition. Your instincts and your intuition will tell you everything you need to know. I kind of call it the head and the heart. The problem is that we don't always pay attention to our instincts and intuition. And this brilliant, brilliant computer that we have sitting up here on our shoulders, it tells us everything we need to know every minute of the day. It's just whether we choose to listen to it or not. What we have to do is start listening to it. I like to point out sometimes when you go into a restaurant, you go to your favorite Italian restaurant, and you order a nice big plate of pasta with marinara sauce, and your instincts are telling you, you know what, I should take that napkin and tuck it down inside my collar here and let it drape down over my white shirt or my white blouse. But in the States, you don't want to look like a dork, or you don't want to look foolish, so you don't do that. And invariably, you look like a dork and foolish when you walk out because you have marinara sauce all over the front of that's your instincts and your intuition, and it's talking to you and telling you. Because ask yourself how many times you've said to yourself, I knew I shouldn't have done that. Maybe it was leaving your keys somewhere, your car keys. But I will tell you the victims remember. I had a young lady approach me one time after speaking to a group. And as I say, I always start out with this part of the presentation. And she said to me, my sister lives over in Brooklyn. And she went back to her apartment one night, and when she walked up towards her door, she went to put the key in the door, and she had a very strong odor of alcohol. And the first thought that she has was, boy, something's not right here. Maybe I shouldn't go in. But she didn't listen. And she doesn't drink, and she doesn't even keep alcohol in her apartment. And she went into her apartment, and she was raped. That's why we have to pay attention to these signals that are being sent to us each and every minute of the day by this computer that we have on our shoulders. This is something that I never thought I'd see. I never thought I'd see something like that. New York City, like Tel Aviv, is a city that never sleeps. So on September 11th, right after it happened, these signs went up all around the city. And it was shocking. It was shocking for all of us to see. The commission was put together, and the chairman of the commission was Thomas Kean, who was the former governor of the state of New Jersey. And at the very end, they came out with this statement that the attacks resulted from, above all, a failure of imagination. I agree with that. I think there are a lot of other reasons, too, and maybe I can touch on some of those today, just give you my personal opinion. But there's no question that we did lack imagination. But I don't know, even if we had imagination, that we would have thought that somebody would fly planes into our towers. Just like we're doing here, just like this conference, and with IDC, we have to come up with creative and new ways of doing things. The technology's out there because we have these individuals who have those minds and can think that way. And it's like somebody mentioned before. I think the professor mentioned that he has to pick his son up there to operate the equipment for him. Well, that's what it is. I certainly don't know how to do these things, but these young people coming up do. So they're the new ways, and they're the young minds and the creative minds that we have to encourage and we have to listen to. The old guys like me sometimes are threatened by that and say, I don't want to listen to somebody who's going to look a little better than me. Well, who cares? Let's get the information. If the people who work for me back in New York are creative and innovative, I think I'm going to benefit by that. I think the chairman and the chief executive officer are going to say, well, yeah, I think that guy Smith should get some of the credit. At least I hired the people. I was smart enough to do that. I'll give you a couple of my little personal things here now. New York City is a harder target for a lot of reasons. Primary reason, the New York City Police Department. Commissioner Ray Kelly has done a fabulous job there. And I have the opportunity of looking at it with two hats, from my law enforcement background and now as a security professional in the corporate world. We had a problem before because we were stovepiped in law enforcement. And by stovepiped, I mean that we had all the different law enforcement agencies, like the FBI, the Secret Service, the New York City Police Department, the CIA, who had, for lack of any better term, sibling rivalries. And knowledge is power, and we all have that knowledge, and can work within our own little stovepipes and talk about what we need to do, but let's not share it with anybody else. Those cultural changes have occurred, and we're sharing information. So that's a big, big step in the right direction. The information sharing will prevent the next attack. Because when you put all that information together, right now, you stand just as the FBI or just as the Secret Service, and if it's a big puzzle, if the puzzle is really a big puzzle of Mickey Mouse, you have an ear, but you're not sure where it goes, and you have a nose, and you're not sure where. But when you get all those pieces together and you put them in there in that puzzle, it makes a lot more sense to you. Obviously, with the position I'm in now, I think that private security is a must. We have to be a big part of this. Just for the obvious reasons alone. We have security guards that stand perimeter. We have employees that report to us all the time. Thousands and thousands more eyes and ears out on the street that can help. Project Griffin in London is a perfect example. Their video surveillance that they use and the partnership that they've formed between the public sector and the private sector is incredible. And I think New York City has taken a big step towards that, towards modeling after that. You'll have a presenter later on this afternoon, Mike Balboni, who is our Secretary of Homeland Security in New York. And he deserves a lot of that credit for putting that partnership together. But it's all about risk. Everything is about risk. It's all about risk assessments. And everybody has to do risk assessments. You need to do it every day when you walk down the street. I need to do it to make sure that I keep everything at back New York Mellon where it needs to be and safe and secure. And it doesn't matter how you do the risk assessment. You can do it very crudely by saying, well, there's a remote chance way over here on the left, and there's a certainty all the way over here on the right, and just so you know where I think we are in New York, we're probably right in between probably and certainty for our next attack. But whether you do it this way or use a mathematical equation doesn't matter. You still have to continually look at things and make sure that you know what you're doing. You know, it's interesting that after 9/11, we had people, for a lot of good reasons, and I can understand this. Look, everybody hasn't been, like General Clark has, everybody hasn't been to war. And this was certainly very foreign to us in New York. And there are people who have no law enforcement backgrounds who did not want to come to work the next day. Forget about the next day. They didn't want to come to work ever again in the city of New York. So we had to try to create an environment that makes it better for them. And one of the first things that we did was go out and speak to them about, look, your chances, believe me, your chances of being involved or injured in a terrorist attack are about 1 in 500,000. Your chances of being involved in an automobile accident where you're injured are about 1 in 8,000. So I guess logic would say, do you say to yourself, I'm never going to get in my car again? I'm not going to drive anywhere again because in the United States I'll get involved in an accident and there's an 8,000 chance that I'll get involved? We don't do that. And we can't give in. And I think these New Yorkers deserve a lot of credit for not giving in. They continued. They kept coming back. But we're still the #1 target in the United States as far as I'm concerned. And I think as far as a lot of the security professionals and law enforcement community is concerned. And there are a lot of reasons why. We're still the financial capital in the United States. And we know that terrorists want to affect the economy. So but what better way? Where we sit at #1 Wall Street, the Bank of New York Mellon, our next door neighbor is the New York Stock Exchange. So our campus is very inviting. We also have down there Goldman Sachs, Merrill Lynch, all of the leading financial institutions in the world. We're an inviting target down there. New York City is the most densely populated city, and we know that terrorists want to kill as many Americans as they can. Stands to reason. And we're the media capital. And what better headlines to shoot all around the world? You know, you all know because you saw them after 9/11. Those headlines, those media events, they create fear. And that fear travels across the states in this media age in a matter of seconds. And in general, we have a problem still, because the farther and farther away we get from 9/11, the more we seem to forget. And the corporate world is not jumping at the opportunity to throw money into security. It's kind of like a necessary evil. And it's a job of people like me to convince the leaders in the companies that we need these things. Not to scare them, but to make them part of the solution. It's a reality. We know it's a reality in New York. It's happened there. And we're pretty darn sure it's going to happen again. But we kind of have to balance that fear with all of the potential threats that we see out there. Because in New York City, as you can remember, we see just thousands of them. And God bless the New York City Police Department. I remember right after the attacks, we had some white powder. It was right after the attacks we had the anthrax scare, if you remember that. And we had a little bit of white powder that showed up in one of our places. And so I called the commissioner and I said, you know, I want to keep this as quiet as possible. Can you just send somebody over and bring their hazmat suits and cases or something and come on up and get dressed in our area? I don't want to scare everybody. So they did that. They came over and did that. And when those police officers came in, we got talking a little bit. And he told me, he said, you know, we're exhausted. That we're getting 4,000 calls an hour for anthrax. 4,000 calls an hour. These poor guys, their eyes were all bloodshot. They probably hadn't slept in days. So that's what they go through, those security professionals. We can't worry just about these terrorism activities. We have to worry about natural disasters. We know in Manhattan that if we get a Category 5 hurricane, they'll be flooding all the way up to Midtown. That's half of Manhattan. So we have to prepare for those things too. We constantly have to do this. If you're not evaluating and benchmarking your systems, you're really doing a disservice. And to me, this is a very important one, because I don't really have the time to pay attention to every new product that comes out there. But if I have a trusted professional I can go to who is a vendor, a contractor, and rely on them to provide me a service, it saves me a lot of time and effort, and quite frankly, it allows me to sleep at night. I don't know if you can really see this from everywhere, but this is just a layout of Lower Manhattan, so you can get a little bit of a picture about what went on. And my point here is to show you, in the case of the Bank of New York, and I had been there for, well, I came in February of 2000, and the attack was obviously September 11th. But if you can see where we are, on the far left side, we had a building down here right on the water, just about in the center, number 1 Wall Street, where the gold is. And on the very far right on the top, 101 Barclay Street, which was right next to the Trade Center, the 7 World Trade Center. 7 World Trade Center, incidentally, was where we were housed in the Secret Service. So all of that very, very blue area there was major structural damage or destroyed. And in danger of collapse was the red area, with the damaged but stable in the gold area. Well, obviously our problem was, at the Bank of New York, that we were so tightly wound in Lower Manhattan, we had 3 primary data centers there. 32 Old Slip, 1 Wall Street, and 101 Barclay Street. And guess what? On September 11th, we didn't have any data centers. Nothing. Talk about business continuity. The whole city was affected. That's the point of this. And I think you probably read over and over again the loss of lives, the property losses, the employees that were displaced, businesses disrupted. We don't think a lot about the megawatts of electricity lost, but believe me, when you're so reliant on electricity, when you don't have it, you realize you can't do anything. And it took over a year and $40 to $60 billion to clean the mess up. And if you've been to New York lately, we're still working. New York Stock Exchange was closed for 4 days, the longest since the stock market crash of 1929. So the whole city was affected. And we were affected personally. Lower Manhattan was destroyed. It was closed. Even today it's sad, because when you go down there, you don't see all the little shop owners that you saw before in the little restaurants. They're coming back. They're still trying to come back, but the insurance difficulties make it almost impossible for most of them. All of the major infrastructure, the applications were not functioning. So did we do anything? I mean, were we able to function? This is what people saw. This is what we experienced that day. It was horrible, and it was unanticipated. There was dust, dirt, pulverized concrete everywhere. And when I tell you that when we walked out on the streets, we were up to our knees in it, it's not an exaggeration. And the worst part was that you couldn't see. You couldn't see anywhere when you were walking around, breathing it in, especially with some of these scares of asbestos. They touched everyone, everywhere. And I have to tell you, these are the patches up there of the New York City Police Department, the Port Authority Police Department, and the New York Fire Department. Having done this line of work for 30 years, 6 as a local police officer and 24 in the Secret Service, I can't tell you the respect I have for all of these people. Absolutely incredible, because they never prepared for anything like this. And the day that it happened, when people were evacuating, we were all evacuating our buildings, people would go to the water, whether it was the Hudson River or the East River, and as they approached down there, the police department and the fire department were commandeering boats and bring them over to dock anywhere that they could. And as people approached, they would say to you, "Where are you going?" And you'd say, "Brooklyn. Get on this boat." And the island was evacuated like that. It was absolutely incredible the way they handled it. They were prepared, but you know, you can't really prepare for anything like that. And like I said before, everybody was affected. So if you're a security professional, if you're in state, local law enforcement, and you think you're not going to be affected, think again. One of my colleagues at the Secret Service who ran our electronic crimes task force, his name was Bob Weaver. And Bob said afterwards, and I think this really captured it, imagine getting up from your desk right now, walking out the door and running for your life while everything you left behind is destroyed. Then tomorrow, go back to work. When you can stand up under that battle-tested environment and actually go to work the next day, then you'll know that you have a robust, redundant system that can come only from pre-incident planning. Can't make it up as you go along. That's like changing a tire on a moving car. Companies that don't do this are risking everything every day. And man, is he right. That's what was there. Let's talk a little about the things we learned. Boy, flexibility. Flexibility is the key. The disaster you plan for is never the disaster you get. And you start thinking to yourself, my God, I got to be right 100% of the time. Well, it's not all that bad. But you do have to keep in mind that you need to improvise, you need to constantly change, you need to constantly evaluate. And you need to try to get the information so that you can move along. Because you have to keep a business running when you're in my line of work. When I finally walked back to headquarters, I had been out doing a few things. Once we evacuated the buildings, and I walked back into headquarters, and my chairman is a big man. And I guess I looked a little bit messy because I had stuff all over me. My suit was pretty well ruined. My wife threw everything away when I came home 4 days later. But the chairman kind of hugged me and looked at me and said, "Okay, now what do we do?" Nice that he had the confidence, but holy geez, now what do we do? What we do is we drill and we exercise. And we do things like seminars constantly with our people. We have tabletop exercises, which is really low intensity. You might have moving pieces on a board and talk about situations. And it's very effective. Or we do functional exercises where we really have a command post and we try to get the adrenaline going and we make it high intensity and put a lot of pressure on the people, these business people, to make decisions. But you can do it anywhere. In academia, you can do it in law enforcement, you can do it anywhere to keep people on their toes. And then we do full-scale exercises. And that's when we do it with the police and with the fire, and we completely dump the buildings and evacuate the buildings. And that goes all over in Manhattan. Everybody's doing that. But you have to have strategies. You have to have strategies to deal with the things that you see up here. And I'll draw your attention, too, to the accountability part, because that's vital. If you don't have all of your managers and all your business lines being accountable for their people, you need to know right away whether you've lost anybody. So you have to have locations where these people know where to go. Crisis management. Because there's no telling what's out there. That's why you have to plan. Well, you do have to plan for those evacuations. But then right after the attack, we learned, well, you know what? We need to think about sheltering in place, too. And sheltering in place really means just hold on, don't leave the building yet. And there are a lot of reasons here why. CBRN stands for chemical, biological, radiological, nuclear. You certainly, in civil unrest, if there are protests going on, you don't want to send people out on the street. And if you had a power outage, which we have every now and then in Manhattan, it's pitch dark at nighttime there. Very, very, very different city. So just walking down the street's difficult, not because of mugging, because we're, with cities with 100,000 or more people, believe it or not, we're the safest city in the United States. But just tripping and falling. And then we also know that history tells us that terrorist groups will use secondary explosive devices. So let's do the first to get everybody to come out of the building, and let's do the second to kill people. So for all those reasons, even as we get back to the natural part, the weather, you can't just evacuate all the time. You have to take a look at what you have. But once you do that, once you say, okay, we're going to shelter in place, then you're faced with, how do we communicate with all the people? So you set up floor wardens, and you meet every hour and come up with a system like that where you can get the word to them. You have to plan for food or water. If they're going to be there, you have to feed them. And where are they going to sleep? You're keeping there overnight, maybe for a couple nights. And holy geez, now how do we clean all the lavatories, the bathrooms, all the environmental things that come along with that? And sometimes sheltering in place is just safe. This was, by the way, right across the street from the office building where we have it with 101 Barclay Street. And that's an airplane tire. So sometimes it's just not good to run outside of the building right away. But once you're in the event, then you have to manage the event. This is exhausting, isn't it? You just keep going from one thing to another. So internal communications. Maybe you need to set up call trees so that when people finally do get home, you can communicate to them. Send it down through the management system and out where you have a call tree and everybody can get the information that way. Or maybe you set up a website. So from home they can go on the website and they can learn where we have to go and what we have to do. Or have them call in the hotlines so that they can get information that way. This was a big one. Okay, we got to go fast. This was a big one. How do you transport people in the 5 boroughs of Manhattan and in the tri-state area of New Jersey, New York, and Connecticut? We had an enormous problem with that. Because when you're trying to get the things that you need, everybody else is trying too. And when I say everybody, I mean everybody. When I say everybody's affected, this is the police and fire department. So if you think they weren't affected. The businesses have to set up somewhere else. They need space. They need a lot of their products to do what they do every day. But guess what? Everybody in that lower Manhattan map that I showed you, so does everybody else need that. So you're all vying for this equipment, trying to find your way around. I believe in liaison efforts. I think that's what keeps you good. Liaison efforts with your next door neighbors, liaison efforts with the city fathers, whatever you have to do. Because it's all about trying to get back to normal, which is very difficult to get back to after an event like this. So you have to be flexible. And you've got to have geographic diversity. We have data centers, 5 of them now, they're all around the world. Hopefully we won't be touched by that again. And as much as I hate the term, you have to think outside the box. The second point here, employee assistance programs, vital. Vital. Because of the stress that your employees are going to encounter and the post-traumatic stress disorders that they're going to see. Management succession. People just may not come back. People may be killed. And get your PR departments to plan to defend you. To say, hey, we're good. You know, as the Bank of New York Mellon, we're good. We're back in operation. But trust your security professionals, no matter what you do. They know a lot. One of my biggest problems is, even though we're more than a $500 million company, and even though we spend more than 11% on our budgets, everybody's a security expert. You know, so everybody knows my job, or at least they think they do. Trust your security professional. They know it better than you do. If they don't, get rid of them. Because what you need more than anything else is a security professional who inspires resilience. I'll end where I started. You all have it right. Doing these conferences and doing what you're doing with the young people is what we need today. Thank you all very much.